Hello humans, it's just Martine and it's time for another episode of Kindle Clear Out. I have what I would consider to be way too many unread ebooks on my Kindle. This is my Kindle, she's my best friend, but as you can see, she has a little problem because she has over 800 unread books. Except that makes the problem seem a lot less serious than it actually is. Because the real problem is that a ton of those books, I don't have an exact number, but a ton of those over 800 books are not just one book. They are bindups. Sometimes that means it's 2 books. Sometimes that means it's 9 books. It really just depends. And so I don't have a feasible non-mind-wrecking way to count how many actual unread books I have on my Kindle. But one thing is for sure, the bindups are a problem. So I figured for this episode of Kindle Clear Out, since I'm doing something extravagant for 12 TBRs anyway, I would go ahead and read 3 bindups that are taking up space on my Kindle so that I could at least feel like I'm making some progress in cleaning up this Kindle. I chose 3 bindups for this video, which again, doesn't seem like much, but I read 12 books. There's this really popular method for dealing with tasks. It's called eating the frog, and it's when you do the hardest thing first. So we're gonna start by reading the bindup that has 6 books in it. Let's go. Book number 1 in bindup number 1 for this video was Earth Alone, which is the first Earthrise book, and I gave it 3.5 stars. In this series, we're following this main character, and he lives on an Earth in the future where like aliens have just brutally attacked Earth, and so we've got like a space fight happening. And basically when you're 18, like chances are that you're going to be joining the Human Defense Force, and such is the case with our main character. His family has historically worked in like the archives and the librarians, but now he has to go to basic training. So the first book is kind of following his time at basic training, and I guess we'll see how the series evolves as I continue reading other books in it. This one was like pretty fun. It had kind of the vibes of Ender's Game, except take out all the things about the main character being super duper smart, which I think is one of the most interesting things about Ender's Game, but make everybody like wildly offensive and yet have people bond over their shared traumatic experiences. And that's what this book was. Basically, we're just following this cast of really quirky characters from all around the world as they're trying to learn how to fight together. I kind of like that dynamic because I think it's interesting what you can play with there, but at the same time, it lacked all the best parts of Ender's Game because the main character that we're following is, in my opinion, nothing special. Although maybe that is what makes this series special, that we're following this character who's nothing special. But it kind of is hinted at that he will become special over time, or is like in the process of becoming special. I don't know. The point is, for this first book, it was like fine. And I think the series could either go up or down. Like obviously the 3 options are up, down, or staying the same. I am worried that it will go downhill, but I guess we'll have to see. I just finished book 2 in this bindup called Earth Lost, and I gave it 3 stars. I feel really conflicted about this book. We are following the same characters from book 1. They have finished up basic training and they head into space, so we're kind of following their journey there. This one was crazy from start to finish, just a lot of stuff happening. They kind of end up on this planet, stranded, and they have to find a way out. This was a really gory one, I have to say. Like, there was a lot happening in this. And then the ending was insane. Like, a twist that I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. It was still pretty enjoyable, though. Like, these are just quick, fun space reads. I definitely feel like we learned more about the alien species that they're fighting in this one, and this author had to have been influenced by Orson Scott Card and Ender's Game, because there are a lot of similarities. There are differences, but there is something so similar about the 2 alien species. They're both modeled after insects, and their mind system kind of works the same. Like, the way that they communicate works similarly. How many of these do I have left? Several. I'm technically a third of the way through, but it's got my attention. I'm interested to see what happens next, for sure. I ended up speedrunning books 3 through 6 from this bindup without filming reviews in between, because honestly I was just going to be saying the same thing over and over again, because every book after the second book, and also including the second book, got 3 stars. And overall, what I've read from the series has left me conflicted about whether I'd be interested in continuing or finishing the series in the future, because it is available on Kindle Unlimited. I feel like this series as a whole so far, from the first 6 books, out of I think 9 maybe? Okay, I was way wrong about the number. We're nowhere even close close to done, has a very weird arc that is not arcing correctly. In the beginning of the series, we're in the middle of this very specific war, and so the fact that, I will not tell you when, but somewhere in the first 6 books, that particular war ends, makes the pacing and the point just really weird and obstructed. In the rest of the series, they eventually end up fighting again in a different situation, but it just made it feel so disconnected and kind of like 2 separate series, even though we're following the same characters over time. I was about to say I really liked the characters, but I'm not sure that's true. Our main cast of characters, I at least enjoyed following them. I didn't care about them a lot, but I cared about them enough, I would say. And although all of them were very stereotypical in different ways, they made for a pretty interesting cast of characters, and I did have a fondness for the characters just based on what they went through. Like, they all went through some really hard things in these first 6 books, and so I couldn't help but be like, you made it, like, keep going a little bit. But with a rating of 3 stars, I think we can all agree it's pretty okay, it's fine. The way that I would describe the series is fun, but nothing special to write home about. It's not a series that I would recommend to other people, and yet out of all the random books that are stacked on my Kindle, it is not the worst one. Nowhere even close. This is a pretty enjoyable random Kindle read for me, so I'm happy about that. And overall, 3 stars, I'll take it. Earlier when I read book 1, I said it could either like go up, go down, or stay the same. I definitely feel like the series went downhill a little bit, but not exponentially. And that's important because some series can go down and keep going down really, really badly. For right now, it's more like stutter, stops, plateauing. Going downhill is fine. Going uphill a little, going downhill. It's not just exponentially dropping. So that's good. And also it feels really, really good to clear a book off my Kindle that is actually 6 books in one. Because usually when I finish a Kindle book that is not a bind up, I'm like, yay, I finished a Kindle book. And realistically in my head, I know I did very little damage to my Kindle library because so many of the books I have are bind ups that reading a book that's not a bind up is barely an accomplishment at all. So this 6 book one, real win. And with that, we're going to read some books that were slightly less of a win because there were fewer in the bind ups, but they were still bind ups because that's the point of this video. And so let's make some more progress with my Kindle. This one's for all the Indiana Jones fans out there because I read the first 3 books in the Kasiga sequence series and it was fine. It was okay. I'm probably not going to be continuing this series for a number of reasons. 1, not the greatest writing ever. 2, a very action-oriented series, and I don't really love reading action sequences, and that's like all these 3 books were. And finally, I feel like the author blessed me because the end of this book feels like it could very much be the end of the series. The next book starts many years later, so I really appreciate that because I wouldn't have continued even if it had been like a cliffhanger. But it was nice that it got to wrap up in some way, shape, or form. I read these 3 books really quickly, which is why I did not talk to you about any one of them individually. But the ratings were generally the same. The first 2 were 3 stars, and the third was 2.5, probably just because I was like getting sick of them at that point and tired of reading so many action sequences. But the basic premise of the series is that we're following this, what's it called? Archaeologist. I almost said anthropologist, which is not correct. We're following this archaeologist, hence the Indiana Jones thing, and he's put forward this crazy theory called like the Kasiga theory, in which he basically posits that intelligent life started like way before we realized. I forget exactly how he puts it, but basically he's like, things have been happening on the earth for longer than we think. And one day, one of his archaeology buddies calls him up and he's like, hey, I've found proof of your theory. Come on out here. So he goes and he sees this insane artifact that actually seems like super futuristic. Things get kind of crazy from there because all of a sudden like 5 different entities are after him. So he takes the artifacts and he runs, and he's running for the rest of the 3 books. I think there were some interesting conversations to be had about like power, who has it, why they have it, etc. Because some of the people chasing him included like agents from the Vatican, the FBI, the NSA. So lots of potential to talk about that, but I feel like we actually didn't dig into those themes very much, maybe. Or maybe we did. I don't know. It just felt so fast. I'm not sure that we dug into anything, which is ironic for a book about an archaeologist. I'm assuming you all laughed there, which is why I left some blank space. I'm happy to say that I got this read and finished. I'm also glad that it went quickly. It was an interesting premise, but again, it was just way too much action. So overall, I give the first 3 books in the series a 3 stars, probably, maybe 2.75, which I never give quarter stars, but because I'm not talking about one book, I'm talking about multiple, I feel like maybe that's fair. It was a pretty fun time, but I'm not going to continue. We've accomplished the goal that we meant to accomplish, which was getting another Bindup from my Kindle library read. Good job, team. I read this Bindup so quick. It was the Panhandle Mystery Series 1. I read it in a week. There are 3 of them. They technically are all kind of related because they have the same setting, but I was a little bit shocked to discover as I went along the way that they all have different main characters and different focuses, I would say. And I ended up giving every single one of them 2.5 stars, which is not great. They're not my favorite mysteries, but they did have some things going for them. Set in Florida. I live in Florida, so that's always interesting to me. I think it's always interesting to read about a place that you know. But also just not the greatest. The pacing was weird on some of them. I think my favorite one was the one that involved treasure, which sounds crazy, diving for treasure, but they were still all only okay. But I'll give them this, they were all really quick reads. And I guess I hadn't put it together when I chose this Bindup for this video, that Michaela Thompson was the author for these 3, and I have read mysteries by her before in another Bindup, and I largely did not love them. I should have known that going in. Also, some things were just crazy to me, I cannot decide if this author has actual experience with Florida or not. In the first book, there is a hurricane, but it comes on so suddenly in a way a hurricane simply doesn't. They seem to have no warning that a hurricane is going to blow through, and it's not set in a crazy time period where they shouldn't know that. I don't think it was in the 2000s, but it was not old enough that they shouldn't have access to that information, that there will be a hurricane in a few days. So I thought that was insane because it read a lot more like a tornado, which was interesting. And that just completely pulled me out of the story because it was this is not what a hurricane is. It's honestly been so long since I read these, and they were not memorable to begin with. So just know they were only okay, but I managed to clear this Bindup for my Kindle, and that is the goal. So mission accomplished. 12 books later, my Kindle is a little bit lighter, and yet the problem still persists. But at least I made some progress. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a big thumbs up and comment down below. Do you read Bindups of books? Why or why not? And subscribe for more bookish and college lifestyle content. And until next time, bye humans, bye!